Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me. I'm excited to have this conversation with Robert Swan this morning. I will start things off with a brief introduction, and then I'll pass things over to Robert, and he'll take it from there. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Harbour, an e-signature and contract management platform. We're on a mission to make legitimate collaboration across the internet fast and equitable. Our business is on a journey, and we are venturing into unexplored territory in the digital contracting space. As an ultramarathon runner, this is not the first adventure I've started where the finish line is too far to see. To make Harbour's journey a success for all of us, we need to be thoughtful while listening to others and while prioritizing trust. To ensure continued success, we need to continue to build upon this foundation of trust by bringing innovation and reliability to our incredible clients and employees each and every day. If we do this, we'll continue to succeed. In the meantime, I've brought along a friend of Harbour's to share a story with you. In his business, if he doesn't listen, doesn't trust, and doesn't deliver on his commitments, he's not going to lose his job, equity, or customers. He simply won't come home. It's my pleasure to introduce Robert Swan, the first person to have walked both the South and North Poles. Thank you. Feel free to take it from here, Robert.
Good evening, wherever anybody is. It's wonderful to be part of this morning's operation here in San Francisco. I'm going to tell you a story today, which is all about commitment, trust, and in many ways doing what you say you're going to do. And Josh, you very kindly introduced me as the first person in history to walk to both poles. So where did this begin? This began for me at the age of 11, when I saw a film. By the way, last time I was properly dressed and last time I had hair, but I saw a film about the real explorers who went to the South Pole and the North Pole. And at 11, I said to myself and the rest of the family, this is it. I'm going to walk to the North and South Poles. And part of the motivation was a piece of history. Captain Scott, the British explorer, believed he was going to reach the South Geographic Pole, plant the Union Jack, and be the first team to ever reach as far south as the pole. And after 900 miles on foot with his team, he arrived at the South Pole and found the Norwegian flag fluttering in the breeze. Amundsen, the brilliant Norwegian, Scott didn't even know he was coming, had beaten Scott and the team. And on their return, dispirited, no hope, they all died. And as a kid, I said, right, that's it. I'm going to try and level the score and put it Captain Scott won, Amundsen won, and beat those Norwegians at what they're best at doing. That was part of the motivation as a kid. And as we all know, and Harbour's in that process of, getting things going. And at the age of 20, I hired a little section of this old warehouse in the East End of London on the River Thames and had to raise $5 million US. One minor problem to my sales pitch is that I'd never been camping. I wasn't an explorer. I just had this dream to go to the pole. And I thought I could raise the money in a couple of weeks and head off south. I got a job as a taxi driver at night. And in the day, I went out to try and persuade companies and individuals to sponsor us. This was possibly not the best sales pitch. And most of them said for 5 years of trying every day, they said, no, Rob, we're not going to sponsor you. You're going to go and die. You don't know enough about this. So I gradually improved my skills and listened carefully as to why people said no. And eventually, don't laugh, everybody, after 7 years of trying, we were there. I'd raised the money. We bought our ship, Southern Quest, and 22 of us now set sail on our ship. No one would be paid for 3 years, but now the game is afoot. Once past New Zealand, the ice starts to coat the ship, and I'm thinking maybe I should have gone to the Bahamas instead. And we arrive on the edge of this extraordinary continent, the Antarctic. Twice the size of Australia, gives you some idea of the scale here with the good old USA. And it's the only place in the world that all of us own. It is the last true great wilderness left on Earth. We unload our supplies. We're 3,000 miles from civilization. There's nobody there. And without energy, you die fast in Antarctica. So 30 odd years ago, our fuel, our power source was good old British coal and jet aviation fuel. That was the best source at the time. We've tried to improve our source since. Now, 5 of us are left on the shores of the Antarctic. For 1 year, the ship disappears over the horizon. It's hard to imagine. We have no communications, we have no radio, we have no postal service. We're isolated now, 5 people for a year, nothing. We won't be connected for a year, imagine it. This is it. And we just hope our ship returns a year later to collect us. And in that time, we must reach the South Geographic Pole. 5 of us now on the edge of the Antarctic, very lonely, very isolated, go into our tiny little hut and we wait. We wait 9.5 months in this tiny little box. And I chose these people, ladies and gentlemen, because they were different. Had I chosen all my best friends, yes, we would have raised lots of money, but we'd have died very soon in Antarctica. Different skills, different attitudes, different ways of doing, and different ways of thinking. And quite honestly, we didn't like each other, even in London. So we now, 9.5 months in this tiny box, how are we going to come through? All annoyed with each other, all arguing to begin with. We learnt that to survive, 3 simple things. 1, try and tell each other the truth. 2, listen to what people are really saying. And 3, engage with humor. So before people wanted to kill each other, we would try and use humor to dissipate those arguments, etc. We came through those long, dark, desperate months in Antarctica, and at last, after 9 months, 3 of us lay out our equipment on the edge of Antarctica. We're attempting something that people said could not be done, the longest unassisted march ever made anywhere on Earth in history. We have no radio communications. GPS wasn't invented. We navigate using the sun, a sextant, and this old watch to one building the size of a football pitch 900 miles to our south. No backup. We know that we're going to get very, very thin, and Josh knows this as an ultra marathoner. You know, we're going to burn a huge amount of energy, but we can't pull the food that we need. So we estimate that we're going to lose at least 50 pounds, each of us, in body weight in 70 days. I was to lose 60 pounds in body weight. Off we go, 9 hours a day, 7 days a week, 70 days in a row, pulling on our backs, 360 pounds on a sledge. 9 hours a day, 7 days a week, as I say. Our first part of the journey is 400 nautical miles flat across the Great Ross Ice Barrier. This will take us, after 400 miles, to the bottom of the mountains. During this time, we have to really show discipline, which, as David Zenoff and Josh, you'll get to know, I'm not the most disciplined person on the planet. But we have to have some rules in this game. And the rule is no miles south, made in a day, no food consumed. So our food and fuel must get us to the pole, not to have us talking about getting to the pole. And that's easy to say sat here at San Francisco Airport. It's a bit more tricky when you're starving and you're not allowed to eat anything for that day. We keep going south, and at last, after 400 miles, we face the hardest part of the journey, the mighty Beardmore Glacier. This is 125 miles uphill to 11,000 feet above sea level. And we must go up the Beardmore Glacier, huge, second biggest glacier in the world. And on this glacier are the desperate crevasses. And crevasses, sometimes you can't see them. And if you go through a crevasse, you don't come back. We carried no ropes or ladders. So if you go in, you hope you die, because it would be a bad day to be 100 foot down a crevasse, looking up and waving goodbye to your friends. We carried no ropes or ladders, nothing. So Josh talked in terms at the beginning of trust, and our trust must make us efficient. And we truly have to trust each other, not pretend to or half trust each other. So when we come to a crevasse, we have to trust the judgment of the person who's in front and unconditionally follow that route. Just do it. Why? Because if we'd stopped 5,000 times to have a feedback session, to sort of discuss it through, perhaps share our feelings on the issue, we'd still be there. We'd be dead. We'd have run out of food. And if you run out of food and fuel on a journey like this, you're dead in 5 days. So our trust kept us efficient to keep those averages, to keep those miles. Every day we must average 12 nautical miles. Sometimes the snow blows off the surface of the glacier, leaving shiny, shiny ice. You've got to wear crampons now to grip the ice. We're starting to get very, very thin now. And at last, after those desperate 125 miles, we reached the top of the glacier. Now, being me, I'm thinking, great, we're there, we've done it. It can't be that far. But this is really only the beginning of the journey. 400 miles across the Great Barrier, 125 miles uphill, we're there in this picture. But now what we face is 300 more and 50 miles across the mighty polar plateau. This is at 10,000 feet above sea level. And in Antarctica, that's equivalent on your body at being at 16,000 feet above sea level. Destination now, the pole. For anybody in the United States of America, we are now standing in an area the size of the United States of America, and we're entirely alone. There's no one else there. Think of that from a sense of isolation. And beneath our feet, 16,000 feet of solid ice. Beneath our feet in this photo, 90% of all the world's ice, 70% of all the world's fresh water. We're standing on it. And trust me, if we continue, I repeat, continue to melt this, we're going to swim. This is, ladies and gentlemen, the most powerful, lethal, dangerous, silent force on Earth. And we should listen to what it's telling us. We're now closing in on the South Pole. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we're on target as we approach the pole. According to our plans, remember, we're not on the iPhone 12. We don't have any communications. But we're hoping that Southern Quest, our ship, has returned to John and Michael, our team at the base camp. They have unloaded an aeroplane. The plane will take off from an iceberg, fly to the South Pole and look for us. And if they find us, we jump on that airplane, go back to the base camp and do something that we promised to do. When I was that 21, 22-year-old talking about going to the South Pole and no one was listening, I needed some help. And I was lucky to secure Jacques Cousteau. I hope some of you might remember his name, Jacques Cousteau from France, perhaps the first real environmental leader for our oceans. And he always reminded me that we live on planet ocean. We don't live on planet Earth. And he, thank goodness, became my patron. He gave me credibility. And you know something in life, all of us can give other people credibility. Dr. David Zenoff has given me credibility endlessly in life. It's fantastic to give others credibility. And he gave me that credibility to raise the money to make this happen. But in return, being Jacques Cousteau, he said, Robert, he said, at the end of your expedition, I want you to leave Antarctica clear of all of your garbage and rubbish. Leave just your footsteps in the snow of Antarctica. Show respect to the only place in the world that we all own. And I said, of course, we'll do that. We made that commitment. Last few miles to the South Pole, think about it, lives in my nightmares. If we'd made one mistake in our calculations on navigation, we could have missed the pole by 50, 70, 80 miles. And we would have arrived, looked around and said, where's the South Pole? 2 days left of food, dead. And as we close in, we'd done it. I cannot navigate, but I was with the best. Roger and Gareth navigated us, full trust in them. They navigated us 300 yards off course using sun, sextant and watch over 70 days, 900 nautical miles. There was the South Pole Scientific Station. And we stood there and we were so proud of what we'd done. Not just us three, but the entire team that had made this happen over 7 years of battling. And I think when you're putting anything together in life, sometimes one can forget to stop and celebrate the successes that you're making as you go on. It's something I've never done in life, but I'm now trying to remember to stop and celebrate. And in the middle of our little celebration, the base commander came out from the South Pole Station and said, Rob, sorry, bad news, your ship sank 5 minutes ago. First thing we heard in 1 year from the outside world that our ship had sunk. Most important thing, everybody's safe. But I've got some problems now. I go bankrupt because all my money was wrapped up in the ship, and you can't insure a ship this far south, so I lose my house, my savings, everything. But that's not really the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that we had made a commitment to Jacques Cousteau to take away all of our rubbish and equipment from Antarctica. And we felt we should deliver on that as a team. And immediately Gareth, who'd spent a year already at our base camp, just walked 900 miles to the South Pole. He volunteered to spend another year at our base camp, because you cannot leave a base in Antarctica without people there. So Gareth and two would remain at the base. I got the rest of the expedition back to civilization, and he would look after the base station. And exactly 1 year later, I managed to get another ship into Antarctica, pulled out Gareth and his companions, and left Antarctica clean and tidy, because we said we were going to do it. And we're very proud of that as a small little team. In my mind, being me, I thought, hang on a minute, I've reached the South Pole. Maybe one day I could achieve a crossing of the whole of the Antarctic continent on foot. Just a little dream in the back of my mind. But something had happened to me walking to the South Pole, something had happened to us walking to the South Pole that really brought me here today. As we were walking, our eyes became painful. We would be rubbing our eyes. And then our skin blistered out and the skin ripped away from our faces in huge layers of skin. And when I got home, I realized that my eyes had completely changed color in 70 days, and we didn't know why. Well, we were told on return by NASA, who I really respect, yes, wait for it, that we'd walked under the hole in the ozone layer the month it was discovered. And this started me thinking, ladies and gentlemen, that maybe our survival on this planet might not be somebody else's problem. Maybe I should have a part to play in that survival. But first, you're all business people, please don't laugh. I thought, right, time to get the dream of walking to both poles achieved, but at the same time, maybe I could pay off my $1.2 million in debt from the South Pole. This was not the best financial decision of my life. The debt was doubled, but actually, who cares? Off we go now to the North Pole. To the North Pole, you must walk across a frozen ocean of ice. 700 miles, every single step away from the safety of land. Every step away from the safety of land. And beneath our feet, as we walk, 5 miles of deep, dark Arctic Ocean. Desperately, desperately hard physical work this time. We don't suffer from the altitude because we're at sea level, but desperately hard physical work. To give you an idea of what this is, I thought of this morning, that it's a bit like attaching yourself to a sled, wearing skis most of the time, and going across 120 miles of a car park. So you go up one car, down the other side, up the other car, down the other side, 120 miles of that. And the big danger is if you go down one of those holes, you go straight into the ocean and the current rips you underneath the ice cap. Game over. This is reasonably intense stuff. And of course, just to add to the fun, you can be eaten by polar bears at the same time. Fantastic, fantastic animals, polar bears, and they're suffering badly at the moment because we're melting their home. Think of that. Sometimes on the North Pole, we get just a heavenly moment, a bit like on a bicycle when the wind's behind you and you feel like you could win the Tour de France. We just have that wonderful feeling of gliding across the odd, small, flat patch. This would be our home for 56 nights in a row, and we had to learn patience. Imagine 8 people, 7 different nations jammed inside this smelly tent. Check on the right there, Daryl, who would become the first American to walk to the North Pole. Look how much he really loved Rupert's music. Not much, but we had to really show patience with each other and again listen to what each other was really saying. Again, patience, trust, listening inside this horrible, smelly tent. I had to remember as leader to look around and just check that everybody was okay. It's so easy at the beginning of any journey, any mission, to have really great communications, everybody communicating. But I realized that my Japanese was really weak. And our Japanese companion, Hiroshi, well, Hiroshi's English not too strong. And at the beginning, it was easy. But as the journey progressed, people didn't bother to communicate with him, and he started to become isolated. And I thought, before the journey, how could I prevent this happening? I knew it would. So I put on my sledge 4 copies of the Yomiuri Shimbun, which is the leading newspaper in Japan. And every 15 days, I would present in the morning, Hiroshi, with 2 hands, of course, his morning newspaper. This really cheered him up and kept him engaged. And just this simple thing would save our lives. Here's me coming in, washing naked, translated into American, minus 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Just a little bit cold. And you will notice, gentlemen, any gentlemen watching today, that there is absolutely nothing hanging down in the central area of the photograph. It's totally obvious that this is extremely cold. 642 nautical miles now away from land. And the only thing that we hadn't planned for now happens. Over 4 days, the ice cap starts to move beneath our feet. Then, after 4 days, it starts to split apart. 5 days later, the entire ocean has broken up beneath our feet. This is way, way, way beyond before people had talked about climate change, global warming, sustainability. So we aren't saying, oh, well, this is climate change. We're thinking, great, we're dead. We're going to die. For the simple reason that in 20 hours of trying to go north, we're drifting south. this photograph was taken in the month of April. The ice at the North Pole 30 years ago was supposed to look like this in August. We couldn't have planned for this. This was the first time this had ever happened in records. And in 20 hours of going north, we're still drifting south. 21 hours, we're coming south, and we're going to die. No one can get to us. We're beyond rescue. No one knows where we are. You can't land a plane. We're beyond helicopter support. And one morning, our Japanese companion Hiroshi, who was still connected, maybe those newspapers had helped that, came out of the tent and said to me, right, why, Rob, are you running 24-hour days? I said, listen, Hiroshi, check the watch, pal. There are already 24 hours in a day. And he said, no, there aren't. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe he needs some of those Russian drugs, to look after him. He's losing his mind. I said, look, explain. And he said, look, Rob, it's always daylight at the North Pole. So we can run as many hours in a day as we want to run. We aren't bound any longer by 24 hours days. Now, we could have formed a little discussion group this morning and probably decided on that. But often you can get so close to a problem, you can't see the solution. Ladies and gentlemen, keep listening. This would save our lives. We now attack 40-hour days, 1 hour a day to stop. If you want to sleep, you sleep when you walk. And we attack the ice. We've got to do it or we're dead. And people become injured. Daryl, our brave American, loses his heel off his foot. This is desperate times. We can't get people out. We keep going. And I think you can, if you try hard enough, make your own luck. And 11 miles from the pole, we get some luck. The wind changes direction. The ice is forced together and we have a platform. And we've done it. And it was an extraordinary moment because at this stage in history, our amazing Soviet doctor, Dr. Misha Malakoff, he'd started off as a Soviet and he arrived at the North Pole as a Russian. And our fantastic German companion, Arved, had started off as a West German and arrived at the pole as a German. So there was lots of things, amazing things happening. And we felt we should also together fly this flag. Still an important flag on this planet, I believe. And yes, I had become the first person in history, let's be honest, stupid enough to walk to both poles. But we'd done this, not me. I'd still be in that warehouse talking about doing it, knowing me, we'd pulled it off. And guess what? Beaten the Norwegians at it. So if anybody ever offers me a talk in Norway, I will pay my flights. I will go for free, simply to have the pleasure of being able to stand up in front of them and remind them that I beat them. We beat them at their own game, and they hate it to have some fat Englishman who's not very good skier to have beaten them at their own game. Captain Scott won, Amundsen won, boyhood dream, job done. Went back home and met up with the great Jacques Cousteau. I'm sure you now recognize him. And Jacques Cousteau didn't say, well done, Robert, for reaching both poles. Well done, Robert, for leaving Antarctica clean and tidy, delivering on your promise to me. No, none of that. He just said, what are you doing for the next 50 years, young man? And I said, well, can I have a quick cup of tea while you tell me? And he gave me 30 years ago a very simple, clear mission. He said, Rob, in the year 2041, the treaty that protects Antarctica for us all, keeps this place as the only place in the world that we all own. That treaty could be thrown away. It could be stopped. We could be stupid enough to exploit the last chance on Earth to show future generations we cared. Will you please go out and make sure that we have the sense to leave Antarctica as a natural reserve land for science and peace? I was given no budget. He promptly, very sadly, died not long after that. And we've been working on this for 30 years. How? Well, we tried to be businesslike, because why would people go to want to own and exploit Antarctica? They'd go there for fossil fuels. So we started, and David Zenoff was there, and I started it not far from where I'm sitting here, the voyage for cleaner energy around the world. And I'm very proud to say, and I think there are some people from the Netherlands dialed in today, that I managed to get a yacht sponsored with the help of your present king in the Netherlands, and our yacht would be called 2041 and would become a huge part of our effort to preserve Antarctica. And she even made it as far south as the Antarctic continent itself. And our yacht, setting off from under the Golden Gate Bridge, would be on this voyage to show people how renewable energy can power a yacht. You should never tell people, you should show them, I think. And we voyaged 200,000 nautical miles around the world. I think I went bankrupt 3 times at this particular stage, but yachts are known to be rather expensive and always need money pouring into them. But we had solar panel sales, we had the engine running on different types of renewable fuels, just showing, not telling people. And every year we head to the Antarctic continent, and I take young people, I take business people, I take more senior people such as myself, women and men from industry, business and commerce, and we head south. And what we see there, and I go every year, what we see there is terrifying. I see every year more and more and more ice piling off this continent into the ocean, and ice that comes from land is going to increase the sea level. Kind of ice that is a shelf, an ice shelf, if that melts, it doesn't raise the sea level, but more and more ice is pouring into the ocean. The other side of things is that if you're going to promote the use of renewable energy, then possibly one needs to go and show people how renewable energy can work even under the most hostile circumstances. Remember, I'd always had that dream of continuing, if you like, to cross the Antarctic continent. And my son, Barney, who is in Australia at the moment, my son Barney persuaded his old warrior of a father to pitch out one more time to do 600 miles to the South Pole, complete the crossing of the Antarctic, but this time take on a massive challenge of surviving only on renewable energy. It had never been done. Throw away the fossil fuels, the jet fuels, and survive only on solar. And we went to NASA, not far from where I'm sitting now, NASA Ames, and incredibly, they produced this technology, unbelievable, where you'd fill this pot with ice and snow, and even at -40, after 6 hours, you'd have hot water. This technology they will use on Mars. Think about that. Obviously much better than what we use, but this would get would get us to the South Pole only on renewable energy. And this was fantastic. My son had persuaded me to get out there, and it was so great to have father and son side by side, 38 years between us, because I think it's so important that generations join together on our issue. And people call me an explorer, but I'm not really. I'm more of a traveler. The real explorers are the people who get me to the pole. I trust them to get me to the pole. Those are the experts. But really, I believe that the last great exploration left on Earth is to survive on Earth. And the heroines and heroes of those journeys are me. It's you. And after 300 miles out of the 600 miles, it all falls to bits. And literally my hip disintegrates as I'm walking. And I can handle pain, but you cannot survive walking to the South Pole if you can't sleep. And anybody who's had hip pain knows you can't sleep. So I'm starting to get weak. And after 300 miles, have to face failure. I've faced failure in everything I've done in life. I mean, everything. But I'd never failed to get to the pole when I said I was going to get there. And after 300 miles, I can't carry on. And I get taken back to base camp. Desperate moment of feeling like I failed. My son, the whole team, the sponsors, the story, everything. But Barney, at the age of 23, says, "Dad, I've got this." And him and his two companions would carry on to the pole, another 300 desperate miles to the pole. Loses a bit of his toe, but he was willing to suck that one up. And I managed to fly in, limping at the time, to celebrate his moment. Nothing to do with me anymore. And I think people like myself really should always try and hand over the baton to the future generations. He'd done it with his team only on renewable energy. Score one, Barney, great job. However, I wasn't going to look at a map of Antarctica for the rest of my life. And my mother, who I'm going to see tomorrow, is 105 years of age. So possibly I might live a little bit longer. And I thought, I can't look at a map and think that we're only 300 miles to go. So this time last year, I went back to exactly where I was flown out and left Barney to carry on. And we would try and complete those last 300 miles to the pole. And I selected for this the best people. I needed the best of the best of the best. You know, I'm 65 next month. And really, people of my age shouldn't be doing this stuff. You know, it's not for people of my age. But I needed the best people, so I chose Katinka and Johanna, or managed to convince them to come. Katinka and Johanna from Norway and Sweden, the best polar travelers at this stage. So they would lead me with our fantastic cameraman, Kyle, on the last 300 miles to the pole. Again, I would be testing out extraordinary technology. Think about this. We got fuel, jet fuel, made from the CO2 that we put into our atmosphere. A company in Switzerland suck out the dirt, the CO2, and make it into jet fuel. Obviously, it's not at scale yet, but think about that. Pretty amazing technology. We'd put that to the test, and off we went. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the only time that I've actually enjoyed doing what I do. I'd hated every mile to the South Pole, every mile to the North Pole, but this time under the leadership of Katinka and Johanna, I actually enjoyed myself. This was great. Gliding across the surface of the Antarctic, my hip was perfect. This was just heaven. 97 clicks out from the South Geographic Pole. I felt I'd done it. I could see it in my mind. It was over. I get out of the tent, lose the discipline, fall over badly, and my hip blows out of its socket, and I'm left lying in the snow crying and feeling extremely sorry for myself. I got flown to the South Pole, had the hip put back in, and please remember that you don't just go there. Every single time you go to the Antarctic to walk to the pole, it's about $500,000 US of fundraising. So I came back home, felt extremely sorry for myself, really. COVID came, and then I thought, hang on a minute, who am I? Who am I really? So got a few more nuts and bolts put back into the hip, and I'm proud to say that next year, getting a bit nervous, we're going back to the South Pole. I thought we could call ourselves undaunted because we had a few setbacks, and I'm taking some wounded veterans, women and men, very diverse backgrounds, people who've suffered in war, are going to join me for those last 97 miles to the pole. I felt me going on my own was a bit boring, sort of old Englishman puts flag in pole, so what? But I think their stories of resilience and hope are very relevant to people today. And personally, their injuries suffered in war I think it's a great message to say that war should never, ever darken the doors of the Antarctic continent. So I'm back, and Josh, you'll like this, terrifying Americans, because I pull tires up hills up in the Sierra Mountains, and I won't tell you what people say to me. I mean, I actually put earphones in, so I just wave and pretend I'm Russian or something, because the comments of me pulling tires up and down hills are really spectacularly annoying. But anyhow, I'm back in training. We've got 20 years to go until that magic year 2041. We're on it, and I just thank you all so much for listening to our story. It's not mine, and I just am proud to be part very much, Josh, of what you're starting with your fantastic team, and I wish you all the very, very best of luck. And at some stage, I might have to get a lot fitter, but I'll come and do a bicycle ride with you at some stage. So all the very best. This is Rob Swan. Time for Q&A. Thank you very much.
Robert, thank you so much. That was incredibly inspiring, and I can't wait to see your journey this upcoming year. I figure I'll kick things off with one question on my end, and for everybody that's here, feel free to click on the chat and send over any questions that you guys might have, and I'm happy to share them with Robert. So first question is, how did you manage your family and at-home life during these numerous trips to the Arctic and the poles?
Well, I think that it's always best to be honest in life. I mismanaged it terribly because I believed foolishly that I was, and what I was doing, I was more important than anything, because I was completely focused on the mission. And I made some terrible mistakes, and I always felt that I felt guilty, Josh. Spent my whole time trying to balance things, and thinking, right, I'm doing this mission, but what about the family? And I sort of felt guilty and sort of annoyed with myself, rather upset with the family, because I was trying to do this balancing and it didn't work. And what I tried to do, and I still try and do it, is to look at this sort of whole balance thing with a bit more balance. So what I try and do is to have a bit more of a wave. And when I go on an expedition, I'm not feeling guilty. And everybody knows what I'm doing. They know that I'm not going to, receive 500 texts, 5 WhatsApps. That today, thank goodness, one has a satellite telephone. So once a week on the journey, I can ring up the family, check how everybody is, and just get on with the job without feeling like I'm balancing stuff and feeling bad about it. And then when I come home, I say to my tiny team, and Caitlin, she's fantastic. I just say to the team, look, I don't want to hear anything from anybody unless it's a flipping emergency, and it better be one. So trying to find that space. And I think the thing that really destroys most of us is this, because this can always chase you down. So when I'm having my family time, I just switch the damn thing off and have done with it, and have actually another small phone that has one number and somebody knows what that number is. So if that does ping, I know I've got to do something about it. So I've tried to do it, not hugely successfully, but the balanced wave approach seems to have worked better than feeling guilty.
Yeah, it sounds like being honest with yourself and others is a good approach to take. So another question that just came in from Lawrence Wilkinson. What do you recommend to those of us who aren't up to polar treks that we might do to support the continued internationalization of Antarctica past 2041?
Well, thanks so much, Lawrence. I think that it really goes down to simple things, and you might even save some money at the same time. I think first is that if we're using solar more in our lives, if it's possible to have more solar at home, if you can afford that. If you can't afford that, get one solar panel in the garden, to charge somebody's flipping iPhone or telephone, or maybe if you've got children, get one solar panel for them and they get into the practice rather than just plugging into the wall. They get the practice of having solar panel on their window in their bedroom and they're charging their phone. The more solar we use, the cheaper it will become. So I think that's a very good way of helping preserve Antarctica, because once we get the use of renewable energy to scale, no one's going to go and exploit Antarctica. And that's why I make these journeys always on renewable energy, promoting renewable energy, because KPMG, Lawrence, will save Antarctica, not me, because they'll just tell people it's not worth going there. Thanks very much for bringing up that one. And I think the other is that wherever you are, you have the right to ring up your utility who provides your electricity and services and say, I would like to have green electricity. Now, that might not mean the power comes from your roof at home. It may come from a solar farm in the middle of Texas or somewhere. But by law, the utility must provide your portion of electricity through renewables. And that means that if more people ask, the more renewable energy they have to buy, more solar, more wind is then put into action. So those are two very simple things you can do to help preserve Antarctica. But finally, whatever age you are, 20 years from now, please, because this is going to come up, I'm going to make sure it comes up onto the radar. Please remember today and say, damn it, what can I do then to help preserve Antarctica? So put it in your diary, 20 years ahead, game on.
Awesome. A question from someone we know well, Dr. David Zenoff. Rob, what were the specialties of the colleagues in the South Pole that sat around the table in the photo?
I think that, thanks, David. I think that those people, you know, I chose because I knew I could do one thing. And that was to raise money and, without sounding arrogant, kind of inspire people to hopefully help us. I am not very well organized and I have no attention to detail really. So Gareth, who would spend 2 years in Antarctica, he is so well organized. He wears 2 wristwatches. Without being rude, he's what I call anally retentive. I mean, incredible. You just want to be disorganized in front of him. He's so well organized. So he would be in charge of all of the equipment, making sure the hut ran. So his attention to detail, his engineering skills would be absolutely paramount. As you probably have recognized in the last 40 minutes, I'm rather a positive person. And I'm the sort of person who just says yes to everything. But that doesn't work. It's dangerous. So Roger, who would go to the South Pole, his mission is, because he's possibly one of the most negative people I know. I love him dearly, but, you know, ask him anything, he just says, no, won't happen. But, you know, so, oh, no, he can't do that. This won't happen. He would be the person that tripled, doubled, quadruple checked the reality of our survival during the journey. He would be the what happens if person. So he would have a system that was thinking, okay, if that happens, this is what happens. This is what happens. So he would be the negative person looking at everything that could possibly go wrong. I would be saying about everything that could possibly go right. We had our own doctor in the hut, Michael, who would be, you know, making sure that we are physically and possibly mentally ready to go to the South Pole. And we had a cameraman, John. And remember, this is extraordinary today, that he made a film of our expedition 30 years ago, and the whole thing was shot on film. There was no video, no replay, no sort of this with a phone to check whether it came out. So he was an incredible cameraman who made a film completely blind of our entire expedition. And his value, David, was he never said anything. He was a person, seriously, that could be filming you and you didn't really know they were there. Brilliant skill for an extremely good cameraman. So that was the team. very different characters, very strong. Often we would argue, but we came through, and I'm damn glad I chose them. I love them all, although I don't still get on very well with them, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. A question from Zonli. Which groups of people and or countries in the world are most supportive of the Antarctica 2041 treaty renewal? And which groups or people and or countries are most opposed or skeptical and need the most convincing, and why?
Well said. I think it really comes down to the fact that the people that I'm after, and in 3 years' time, I hope Josh will be able to come and see us off, and David will expect you there 100%. We're going to start a voyage around the world to engage people. So I think let's start with the positives, that I'm going to go around the world and persuade lots of countries that would have no interest at all in going to exploit Antarctica, like sort of Fiji, Tonga, Kenya, wherever it is, and get countries behind saying, yeah, we've got every right to be able to say hands off, because it's our responsibilities of, as nation states on the planet. So I'm going to go around getting those countries behind this. The countries that are interestingly behind this are countries like the UK, Australia, New Zealand. They're keen to see this protected. I've been working, I spent 5 years on a bicycle, Josh, going around India. I've got India starting to get behind this. But I think the two nations, which are no surprise, are Russia and China. They don't seem that happy to sort of get behind this. But remember, no one owns it. So my belief is, if we have that to say no one owns it, and it's not financially worth going there, then maybe Russia and China, won't see the point in trying to go and exploit it. Those are the dangers, and that's not being rude to Russia and China. They have every right to think what they want to think. But I work a lot in those two countries with our Russian doctor who got us to the North Pole, and I do a lot of work in China. And my hope is that if I get to the younger generation today in China in 20 years' time, hopefully they'll have some influence. It's a big battle, but as you might imagine, I'm not backing down from it. I hope that answers, trying to address them, but then getting as many countries as I possibly can behind the idea of saying hands off.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, 20 years feels like a decent enough time scale to change people's minds. But a great question from Pavel. How did you manage to pay off the debt, and or did you?
Well, no, and this was extraordinary. Is that I did have to pay it off. There's no getting out of it. And so I was never a public speaker at all. And I was inspired. This is a great story. I'll be very quick. That basically I was inspired from that film, remember? And the great actor in that film was a chap called Johnny Mills, Sir John Mills, very famous actor at the time in Great Britain. So I went to go and see him with $1 million in debt. And I said, look, Sir John, it's all your blasted fault that I walked to the South Pole because I watched your film all those years ago. Any ideas to pay off the debt? And he said, well, young man, I think you could possibly talk your way out of it. And I said, I've tried. The bank won't listen. He said, no. I will teach you some skills of public speaking. And he gave me some great public speaking lessons. And I had to develop it. It wasn't good to begin with, and it's still not perfect, but I tried really, really hard. So then in came David Zenoff. David and Janet, I know you're listening today. And David looked at my slideshow and went, we need to review this, Rob. And very kindly, he helped me get the slideshow more relevant to business and industry and teamwork and leadership. And so I did this through public speaking on an international level, started at, like $500 a talk and gradually moved it up. And that's how I paid off the debt. And I'm extremely proud that we did do that, because I think that if you do things like that, your track record becomes better, especially with the bank manager.
Yep, that makes sense. Easier said than done.
Oh, no, it was desperate. It took 15
Yeah.
years, 15 years of my life to pay it off.
Wow. I know we're coming up on time, so I'll add just a quick follow on from Pavel's question and then one to end it. So just Pavel asked, what's the name of the movie about your travels and where can we find it?
In 2041, sorry, robertswan.com has got a little bit of stuff on there. And Pavel, if you want to drop me an email, or maybe as a follow-up after this, we can send you out some information and maybe even a little video for you to watch. But robertswan.com or 2041foundation.org, organized, can tell the tale of what we try to do. And please just keep interested. If you've got children, tell them that you met the Iceman today, and let's have some fun with it. It's important to me that this is hopeful, not negative.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. And I think this is a great one to end the conversation with. And it's not because it's from my mom, who happens to be joining today, but we
Hi,
have
Mom.
a lot of other great questions here that I'll share with you after that we didn't get to, Robert. But what would you consider success of the current 2041 mission you're on now, and what do you need in order to accomplish it?
I just need to keep going. I don't want to see this whole issue of the preservation of Antarctica get lost in the white noise of our world. I think that issue needs to be raised up. I intend to spend the next 15 years getting out there on a voyage around the world, starting in 3 years' time. And I think the ideas of how we do that are really important. We've got the foundation, which will raise a bit of money to make that happen. So I think it's really, really important I keep the issue above. And I just want to say to one mum, I'm off to see my mum, and I haven't seen my mother, who will turn 106 actually in October. I haven't seen her for a year because of all this COVID nonsense. So I can't tell you how excited I am to get on the plane. And I'm her youngest son of 7. So I'll be able to go and see Mum, and I'm so much looking forward to that. And I think that actually positivity and love will help save Antarctica, not negativity and people getting angry. We can do it, I think, in a really special way, and I intend to keep doing that. And I hope I'll meet you one day.
Absolutely. Well, Robert, thank you so much for joining us this morning, for your inspirational talk, and for all that you're doing for the planet and for the generations to come. And you're forever a friend of Harbour's. And so when you're back in the Bay Area, I'll look forward to a very hilly bike ride and pulling some tires up some hills together.
You're on, Josh, and good luck to you and the team to help get this to happen. I think what you're doing is fantastic. And I really look forward to bicycling with you, but I will be there and I won't give up, however far behind I get. Thank you all so much. Take care of yourselves.
Thanks, everyone.